The problem with marriage was that we passed down private property through the father. And as long as men have an incentive to build a legacy, the only way we can erase that is to get rid of marriage.
On the topic of Andrew and why he's doing so well at the moment, on a personal level, I've found that he's been very, very influential with me in terms of the way that I've thought through our conversations and through watching his channel and his debates, because Christian ethics is to me the future. And it kind of just made sense because I was very much in between the sort of red pill modern day and then the heavily Christian worldviews. And I was thinking,
Right.
we do live in this modern world where marriage is a massive risk and you really could get shafted if you do that. But I would love to have this super duper traditional marriage. But how do I marry those two? Because I live in this world.
Right.
And I like the idea that he was talking about the other day, and he spoke to me about it briefly one time as well, about like what kind of a marriage was it?
Like a covenantal marriage
Covenantal
through the
marriage.
church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that, because I like that. It really spoke to me.
Yeah, I would love to. I'm so glad that he's talking about that. I have a sequel to this book. This is the first book, by the way, guys,
Awesome.
that
I'll put
Jake's
that. I'll
talking
put
about
those
that
links
he
down
just
below.
read. Yeah. The second book that's going to be coming out talks about feminism in the East at the same time period. So we're talking about like Russia, Eastern Europe, Central Asia, the communist bloc, even Israel, how the same types of people who were behind the same funding and everything, but how they used Marxist dialectics to push feminism there and what some of the differences were. And of course, now, since the university system got captured by Marxists in the 70s and 80s, it's largely here too now. But I think where things really changed, and we don't know a lot about this because in the West, we're very separated from the East, right? Because of the
Mm.
Cold War. I mean, there's been a long time separation. Even Eastern Christianity versus Western Christianity is 1,000-year-old, dialectical tension there. But the Cold War made it much worse. So most of us here have never heard of the feminists who were Marxist in the East and what they did. And the first move made by the major feminist figure there, her name was Alexandra Kollontai. She was Lenin's Bolshevik commissar for social welfare. Very powerful, high-ranking Bolshevik woman. She spoke 5 languages. Her father was nobility. He was like a high-ranking army official for Russia before the revolution. Fascinating figure that almost none of us have ever heard of, but
Didn't
she's
Lenin
actually,
legalize abortion as well?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was the first one to make abortion not only legal in any country in the world, but paid for by the state. It was free in state hospitals
Mm.
as a part of their first attempt at socialist health care. And it was only legal for like about a decade until Stalin came into power, and he had people kind of do an assessment of the population because they had just been through a famine and a war. And he found that there were 3 abortions in Russia for every 1 live birth after only a
Whoa.
decade. It was bad, and he was like, well, there won't be a Russia if we don't dial this back. So it wasn't that he found it morally offensive necessarily. It was more that just Russia won't exist, so we have to scale this back. So he did put a lot more restrictions and essentially make it mostly illegal again. But the other thing she did that was a huge deal was she was the first person to conceptualize and then institutionalize making marriage through the state as a state certificate. They essentially had no fault divorce. You could go get an easy divorce. The other party couldn't really contest the divorce, so you could have unilateral divorce. Now this is in 1918, 1919. So we're talking 50 years before we had that here in the West at all, that they were already doing this there. And the reasoning behind it, why she wanted to make marriage a state certificate rather than a sacrament of the church, which Russia being, Orthodox Christian, always had it as a sacrament of the church. The state really didn't have anything to do with it. You didn't have to go get a marriage license or any of that. You got married in the church. She changed that. She completely neutered the church. They repossessed church property, dismantled the church in Russia, and she made it easy, no fault, legal divorce, just like we have today.
Mm.
And her reasoning, she wrote about this very extensively. She said the problem with marriage, other than it being a sacrament of Christianity, which she hated, was that we pass down private property through the father, right? Through it, it always goes through the patriarchal lineage, that private property, businesses, things like that are passed down. And as long as men have an incentive to build a legacy, like, why do men want to own property? Why do they want to build and grow a business? Why do they want to have something to hand down to future generations? It's their legacy. They care about their own children and their grandchildren and the generations beyond. And she said the only way we can erase that is to get rid of marriage. We can't make it a sacrament. We have to make it more of just like a living arrangement, because then we'll basically dissolve this nuclear family nonsense, which now you hear people all across the Western world also saying, yes, we want to get rid of the nuclear family. It's problematic for this same reason. So she said the only way we're going to get everyone to put all their efforts, all their love, allegiance, everything, is to get rid of the church and get rid of the family. And then all that's left is Lenin. She said, Lenin should be your husband. Lenin should be your daddy. All your allegiance needs to go to the state. And children should be raised communally. So this was the first time they had creches, daycares, they had communal living, where she would say mothers need to understand that their job is not to raise their children. Their children belong to the state, which you guys might remember Hillary Clinton during her presidential run telling people that their children did not belong to them, that they belong to the village, that they should be raised communally as well. So we're still seeing these ideas over 100 years later. And she said, nobody should own anyone, just like we don't own property. So she knew that by doing this, we're going to just kind of get rid of marriage as an institution. We're going to phase it out, and we can just have camaraderie, right? Comrade. So, maybe I have a boyfriend who's my intellectual boyfriend, and then I have a boyfriend who meets my physical needs, and then I have another boyfriend who meets my romantic, sensitivity needs.
I think we literally saw this scenario on whatever podcast like a few days ago. There was a clip where some girl said, I think you even posted it, saying that she has like 5 boyfriends.
Yes,
all for different needs.
And well, the reason is because I see these ideas, and I know the first people who were writing about them over 100 years ago, and that those ideas have been pushed down and propagated through the university systems, and they're treated of and thought of as these highly intellectual ideas that are going to solve all of our problems, when that's not what we see in the reality at all. But all of that just to say that the reason Andrew and I believe in having a sacramental marriage through the church is because then it's something that has an existential meaning. You, as husband and wife, are responsible for each other's salvation. It's not just a living arrangement. It's not just a division of labor. It's not just, it works better if one person's working and one person stays home. It's really not about that. It's much, much more important. You have something where the two truly do become one flesh. And there is no more room between you. There is no more of this tension where you're constantly fighting for control, competing with each other. It's two wills battling it out and always trying to sort things through. No, we're now one flesh. His salvation is my salvation. My fate is his fate. And the fate of our children and the future generations that come from our children depends on us and whether we stick together and stay on the same page and grow together come whatever may, right? But when you turn it into, well, we're going to go down to the courthouse and fill out this little form, and then I guess if it doesn't work out, we'll split the stuff and we'll split the kids and we'll just try again with different people. Why are we surprised that nobody cares about that? Why are we surprised when you turn marriage into something it's harder to break a cell phone contract or a gym membership than it is to dissolve your family? Why are we surprised about that? It's lost all meaning. It's lost the deeper transcendent meaning that it historically used to have. And that's not an accident. It's not like we just forgot about it. That was intentionally destroyed by people who saw that as the main obstacle to what they wanted, which is a world with no barriers, a world with no boundaries. There's no sex, there's no gender. We're a beige, unisex world. We all are working for this stateless global society where everybody has just enough, but nobody has too much, and this sort of thing, right? So, but I think people get this idea in their heads that, we just kind of lost our way. And it's like, no, there were people who were really thinking about this for hundreds of years and had a plan, and the plan worked really well. And those people are very powerful and they pass that on. So it's, yes, she kind of started a lot of these ideas, but a lot of them do go back to ancient times, which is why the book has to follow the thread all the way through. But I mean, that's why we're where we are now. It's not a mistake. They really don't want men to, we talk all the time about men, right? Men don't have any inspiration. They don't have any motivation. They're checking out. Men don't want to date. Men don't want to build a career. Everything's too expensive. Why is everything so expensive? Like, we look around and we go, how did it get like this? Well, it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't just, oops, we just randomly ended up here. No, this was the plan going back a couple hundred years to purposefully take away any motivation men had for building legacies. Men used to build churches that took multiple generations to finish. Men would start work building a cathedral that they would never see finished in their lifetime, but maybe their grandson would see it finished. Not only do we not have that, but men don't even see a reason to plan for tomorrow or next week because they can't build wealth. It's incredibly hard to start a business and survive. It's incredibly hard to start a family and survive. The whole entire system is purposefully built against that.
Yeah. So if you had to give like a 1 or 2 sentences about what that next book is going to be like about at its core, what would you say?
It's called Red Feminism because it's about it's about the two mindsets, right? And a lot of these women on both sides. So in the liberal West, they had, you know, the egalitarianism was the driving force. Like, it was a more capitalist thing and they wanted property rights and individual rights. But in the East, it wasn't like that. They were pushing feminism for a whole different reason and pushing equality for a whole different reason. And it wasn't because women's rights. They didn't think of it that way. It was more like, we just need to erase gender altogether. But there were Western feminists who felt that way too. And they would write, I found letters, you know, from like the 1920s, the 19-teens, the 1800s of these women that would write back and forth across continents at the time. Or some of them would travel from, you know, Russia to America and vice versa, because a lot of them would meet at like communist international meetings and stuff like that and have brainstorming, and they would write and they would communicate back and forth. So it's more about like that feminist dynamic and then how they synthesize the two together.
Right.
So,
okay.
And that's a pretty common Hegelian concept, right? You start with
thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis
and solution. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So that's kind of what it's about. But there were some, if you thought the Western feminists were bad, holy moly, some of these ones in the East they would put the Western feminists to shame, honestly, with the level of depravity and things that they were up to. So,
well, when are you thinking about releasing that? Is that a while off?
It will be sometime this year. Okay. I'm trying to go see if I can get the manuscript actually published through a publisher instead of self-publishing this time, just to get it more reach, get better printing quality. Amazon, you know, self-publishing can be tough to get like really good quality printing and things like that. So, I think it'll do fine. I think that'll be fine and it will work out, just because the first book has been like way more successful than I ever thought. Like I said, I thought it was going to be like 10 people read it, but it's sold thousands of copies all on its own. So hopefully this year, and I will definitely keep everybody posted on that.
Yeah, and we'll do another show when you release that as well. So we'll leave all of the juicy details for that one. If you enjoyed that reality-based podcast clip, make sure to subscribe to the reality-based YouTube channel. We'll be uploading many clips and the full podcast. And also, if you prefer the audible version, you can check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts at Reality Based.